MARKO CADEZ, the president of the Serbian Chamber of Commerce. MARKO, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, let's start with that first question, because I have to tell you, even people I know who are watchers of Balkan politics were taken by surprise by this announcement. Why did Serbia decide at this point to pledge to move their embassy to Jerusalem?
So just to clarify the agreements from Washington, I was in Washington with my president. I was part of the delegation negotiating this agreement, and there are two agreements signed, one between Pristina and United States, and another between Serbia and the United States. So it's like combination. So in our agreement, we indeed, President negotiated and indeed expressed readiness to move the embassy to Jerusalem until, I think, in 1 year time or something like that. But what we also said in this agreement is that we will, until the end of the month, open in Jerusalem state office, which is joint office of government of Serbia and Chamber of Commerce of Serbia, which is dedicated to innovation and cooperation with Israel. So our main goal, and why I'm in Israel today and in these days, is to speak and with a lot of people, with a lot of companies, with, of course, with public administration, to see how to proceed and how to cooperate as soon as possible on the field of innovation, which is, we studied Israel a lot. We made some kind of, let's say, small Israel on the Balkans in regards to digitalization. Serbia made in the last 5 years progress in digitalizing not only public administration, but making the legal and education system conform to the new economy. What it means, we are one of the 2 countries in Europe which introduced the obligatory coding in primary schools. So our children in Serbia are learning, and have to learn, they're not asked. Nobody asked us if we want to learn mathematics when we were kids, right? So our kids are learning since 5 years from the 5th grade until the whole primary school, 4 main coding languages, and after that in secondary school they're going to specialization. We also introduced the legal and tax, let's say, incentives for the investments in R&D, in innovation, and cooperation between countries, between companies, multinational ones, but especially, for example, what we want to achieve here is to make this cooperation between Israel. Israel can only win through this kind of cooperation.
For sure, Mark, and of course, if Israel, the startup nation, that would be a natural field of cooperation. But I do want to get back to the diplomatic issues. We have heard in this studio from some Serbian guests, and there have been reports even today, that Serbia is in some way conditioning the decision to move its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem on Israel not granting full diplomatic recognition to Kosovo. First of all, is that correct?
So what I can tell you, as somebody who is not in the government, but very near to it, as somebody who's representing the private sector and working with the government together, what I can state is that, of course, there is a political difficulties and if somebody could understand this, I think the Israeli people can understand it. So what will happen, let us just wait and see how the things developing. But I think this readiness to be the first European country to move the embassy to Jerusalem is not a small thing. And not only that, but also opening now, exactly in this month, opening the state office. It is not just a commercial office of Serbia. It is a state office together with the Chamber of Commerce, which is under the umbrella of Serbian Prime Minister. She's actually also the Prime Minister, which is dealing with digitalization of the whole.
I'm going to come back to that, especially the European or EU pressure that Serbia is feeling. Let's come back to that. But I do want to just again sort of clarify something. I take what your point said. I don't want to go into the intricacies of Balkan politics. But as you mentioned, Israel on its own has been very reluctant to recognize Kosovo as an independent state because of the parallels with the Palestinian situation. But the understanding seems to be that the Trump administration is presenting this as a sort of package deal, that Israel recognizes Kosovo, Kosovo moves its embassy, sets up its embassy in Jerusalem, and that is also, as part of that whole package, Serbia making that move. So, in other words, it sounds as if Israel is being is sort of getting caught between what the Trump administration wants to see and perhaps what Belgrade wants to see.
Let me come back to the first statement. So, what Serbia signed, and I was in Washington, I can tell you, I was in the room. What Serbia signed is one agreement where nobody mentioned Israel or Kosovo.
Okay.
We signed the agreement where we expressed readiness to move our embassy. We signed the agreement with other points which are very important, economical ones, which are very important for not only for Serbia but for Kosovo, for all the whole region. So that is what we signed as a Serbian. That is what Serbian president signed in Washington. Okay, what Israel will do, I think Israel will know at best. The Israel politicians and the people who are deciding, the political leaders, will know what to do in the name of Israel. So nobody can talk about, being pressed or being not pressed. So I think what Serbia signed is a clear stated in this document, and in this document is what I have now expressed. It's a clear point. So if you read the document, there is no mentioning about it.
Okay. Just briefly to get back to your point that Serbia, I do want to briefly get back to your point about Serbia being the first European country to make at least the pledge to the economic office and maybe an embassy in Jerusalem. Of course, the EU has already reacted negatively on this. Serbia, of course, hopes to become a member of the EU. So is that a problem for Serbia, possible EU opposition to that move, to these moves of its embassy to Jerusalem?
Look, Serbia is now not in the EU. Serbia is a sovereign country. Serbia is on the way in the EU. This way is well structured, not only for Serbia, but all candidate countries which are negotiating. So negotiations will take some time. Again, we are on the good way. We are negotiating chapters, as you know how the deal is structured. So let us wait a little bit to see the relation between EU and Serbia on this issue. But what I think is that as the time passes, I think that we will see also some movements in the position of the EU, not only because the EU will move, but because I think, we had a normalization not long ago between the UAE, which is one of the main investors in Serbia, with Israel. So I think the things are moving well.
Okay, we'll have to end at that point. MARKO CADEZ, from the president of the Serbian Chamber of Commerce, thank you for joining us on The Rundown.